Fooly Cooly is a classic anime series from the early 2000s. It's only a 6-episode long OVA and is a lovely audiovisual experience over its short runtime. The show contains many strange events that can be hard to comprehend literally, but the feeling tends to come through quite well. You should watch it. Fooly Cooly is often enjoyed on the basis of its vibes. The plot itself doesn't need to be deeply understood, some say it's inherently incomprehensible, but I like to analyze stories by looking at lots of details and trying to line them up in a way I find meaningful. I'm just making up an interpretation I like. I make no claims to uncovering creator intent or anything like that. When I watch the show while keeping these ideas of mine in mind, I just find it to be a richer and more interesting experience. Plot points click more smoothly into place, character motivations feel more consistent, and various messages I think could be drawn from the work come through more saliently. So here's my analysis. Let's start by looking at our ostensible villain, Medical Mechanica. They want to flatten the planet, smooth out the wrinkles in the brain, make it all blue. The color blue is often associated with them and their exploits. But I don't think they're meant to be pure evil. They make robots and medical stuff. These are good things generally. Medical Mechanica represents logic, reason, structured thinking. These are not bad, but they can be taken too far, and that's where Medical Mechanica becomes a problem. For instance, they're not leaving room for passion or any kind of emotion. I'd say guitars demonstrate the nuance. All the guitars in the show are electric, basses for the most part. They're products of concerted rational intellect, really not that different from the robots that embody the concept of Medical Mechanica. And yet, as musical instruments, their entire purpose is to express and induce emotion. I think it goes to show that reason and emotion are not necessarily opposed concepts. They can be combined to great effect, and guitars epitomize that. One huge plot point are NO channels. Just what are they? In Amarao's words,
NO utilizes the right brain and left brain's distinct thought processes to open up an interdimensional channel capable of pulling things through.
In a popular understanding of neuroscience, the left side of the brain performs structured and rational thought, while the right side is more intuitive and emotional. This dichotomy is found all over the place, and there's a wide range of symbols representing it. Note also that the left side of the brain controls the right side of the body, and vice versa. So if you hear left or right, you have to wonder if it means the brain or the body. But the two big categories are emotional, logical. Right brain, left hand, right hand. Red, blue. Fooly Cooly. Medical Mechanica turning planets pure blue shows how they're trying to make everyone entirely rational and not at all emotional. Structured, efficient, but unfeeling. They're threatening the planet Earth with this sort of outcome. Maybe this could be taken as a commentary on Japanese society circa 2000. But how are they trying to do this? They're going to smooth everything out using a giant iron, and it seems like they need the power of Atomisk to do so. In fact, when Atomisk's giant red bird form appears, it moves the iron a little bit with its foot. It doesn't seem like it's really intentional, it almost seems like it's an accident, an automatic reaction. I think it demonstrates one of the central messages of the show. The power of Atomisk is largely red, emotional. Characters that use his power become red. This is needed to drive the iron and turn the planet blue. In other words, even if you think you're being completely rational, there's actually some powerful emotion behind your thinking. You can't just be entirely reasonable. Something like that only happens because there's some emotional force driving it, whether you realize that or not. So the planet is like a human being writ large. Naota is very much like this, of course. He's often given reasons for his behaviors.
Here, I can't drink that, it's too carbonated. Anything wrong?
You're all sweaty. You could at least change out of your uniform.
You smell like cigarettes. The strong ones.
I haven't been smoking.
But we can tell those aren't the real reasons. He actually has feelings about those situations, which he doesn't want to acknowledge. So instead he comes up with rationalizations. He's not actually being reasonable. He may try to act like a pure blue planet, but there's really a huge red power making him that way. The other obvious color changer is Kanti. Kanti came out of Naota's head and fights various other robots, most of which also come out of Naota's head. All these robots represent Naota's thought processes. His inner struggles are being physically manifested as cool robot fights. So what kind of idea does Kanti represent? He's around for most of the series, so it's an idea that Naota is dealing with the whole time. I'd say Kanti is Naota's desire to help Mamimi. He first shows up when Mamimi is overflowing after Naota tells her about Tasuku's new American girlfriend. When Kanti is red, he's more powerful, and Naota's will to help Mamimi has the full emotional backing that makes him want to help in the first place. However, Kanti doesn't spend most of his time red. That's when this idea doesn't have its emotional backing. Non-red Kanti is a model servant, providing help and service to everyone around him, sometimes to such a degree that it feels inhuman. This is the rationalization for Naota's will to help Mamimi. It's not that he feels anything in particular about her, it's just that he's a helpful guy. This idea, stripped of its true emotional core, leads to being helpful to everyone all the time. This is how Conti usually behaves. But once in a while, that core emotion sparks back up and Conti becomes more powerful for a little while. And just what is the emotional core of Naota's desire to help Mamimi? The needs thing is that you can plug in what you think makes the most sense. Considering the overall story, I think it's something like a sense of guilt. For example, in the first episode, he delays telling Mamimi about Tasuku's new girlfriend because he's not sure how it might change Naota and Mamimi's relationship. Despite his complaints, he's pretty happy with keeping it how it is. He doesn't want to risk changing it, whether escalating it or breaking it off, so he's hesitant to tell Mamimi something which might make her rethink things. But he also feels guilt for keeping this important information away from her for his own selfish reasons. This guilt manifests as a desire to help her, as Conti. So here, you might say he's being consumed by guilt. But what idea is Conti fighting? In episode 1, it's the idea that Mamimi actually likes Tasuku instead. In this case, the robot is a left hand. That's a great symbol for him. Tasuku is best known as a sports star. Left-handedness represents his great emotional power, and we know he's a lefty from how he wears his glove in this one image we see of him. Naota's desire to help Mamimi overcomes his jealousy of Tasuku. However, he's promptly distracted by Haruko.
Wow! As soon as I said that, I knew I shouldn't have. In that moment, just for a flash, she looked like my brother.
He strays from helping her just because it feels right, and instead flirts with the idea of actually replacing Tasuku for her. Maybe he too can be amazing. Maybe. He grapples with this idea for quite a while afterwards. In episode 2, he's dealing with the pros and cons of being such a helpful person. It could be a lot of effort for not a lot of reward for him.
Bless me with your kiss, your absolution. Oh, kiss me. Oh.
Maybe he deserves better.
So, you came for me, huh? I'll give you a reward.
Huh?
It's even better than CPR.
This is the idea he struggles with, but when he sees how dire Mamimi's situation can become, his guilt flares up and lets him overcome it.
I asked myself what I could do for Mamimi. I decided to stay by her side. Forever.
Episode 3 is where things get really interesting. After all, the robot there doesn't come out of Naota's head, it comes out of Ninamori's head. So it's not an inner struggle within Naota this time. This episode also serves as a microcosm that demonstrates a lot of important ideas that apply throughout the series. But anyway, the robot comes out of Ninamori, so it's her idea. So what's on her mind this episode? A lot of things. She keeps pestering Naota to show up to rehearsals for their play. She's class president and wants class activities to run smoothly. But actually, the reason she insists on Naota is that she's attracted to him and wants to get closer to him. But playing on his affections could be a way to make sure the play goes well. She actually cares a lot about the play because she wants her parents to see it. Even if she won't admit it, she cares a lot about her parents' marriage. This is an impressive series of emotional drives and obscuring rationalizations, covering each other layer by layer. Blue on red on blue on red. I'd say this is exemplified by her purple hair, quite a rare color in Fooly Cooly. Her conflict with Naota is about how he spends his time. He doesn't want to devote himself to this school play because he needs that time to spend with Mamimi. It's Haruko who most directly spurs Ninamori's jealousy, but Haruko is often a distraction, an exaggeration of something that's already there. After all, many of the conflicts of the show would fundamentally still happen even if there weren't robots and aliens and space cops. They just wouldn't be so flashy and action-packed. Anyway, Ninamori's robot attacks Conti, who is Naota's helpfulness toward Mamimi, as soon as it spots him. Ninamori wants Naota to stop hanging out with Mamimi so much and be with her instead. That idea gets defeated. The details of the fight are quite interesting and I'll say more on them later. But the conclusion of the fight represents Naota explaining to Ninamori that he needs to help Mamimi, and she ultimately relents. After this point, she has a much more sympathetic eye toward Mamimi. It does feel a bit unsatisfying to have a conflict resolved by an implied off-screen conversation, but Ninamori's character growth largely happens off-screen.
All he needs to do is say what he really feels. That's what I did, then I cried and stuff.
Besides, regardless of the details, we see a conflict between Ninamori and Naota boil over, then a robot fight, and in the next scene the conflict has resolved. So whatever happened between the actual characters is not shown, and that's just how it is. I do think Naota never came to rehearsal since he's surprised by Ninamori's costume, but he is at the actual play. He'll do that much.
They're fake.
And what does it matter that Ninamori's costume glasses are fake? She's saying this to Naota. It's showing there's real emotion among her layers of rationalization. After all, once you accept that Ninamori wants the play to happen for her parents, you might think she was only pretending to be interested in Naota to get him to play his part well. It didn't work, but that's not the point. However, the intimacy between Ninamori and Naota is built largely by the secrets they share with each other. She showed him that she actually wears glasses, and you can see the lenses, those ones are real. So this isn't the same thing as the false frames she's wearing in front of a whole crowd. She wants Naota to know that Despite everything, she really did share a real secret with him. She really does like him and genuinely wanted to get closer to him. She wants him to know she wasn't just trying to use him. Kanti himself is actually concerned that Ninamori may take Naota away from Mamimi. He tells Naota as much, a big deal, since Kanti rarely expresses anything of himself.
Don't worry, she's very grown up.
Oh, Ninamori's very grown up alright. She tells herself that she doesn't mind her father's secretary trespassing on her parents' marriage. She pretends it's just normal adult behavior, so why shouldn't she try and take Naota away from Mamimi? By now, Mamimi has even been referred to as Naota's wife.
It's his wife. Yeah, he's married to an older woman.
Let's switch gears a bit and discuss something a bit more mechanical. Ninamori's robot reveals a lot about Haruko and Medical Mechanica's intentions. This is a robot which emerges despite Haruko never hitting the person in the head with her base. In other words, this is more like what's supposed to happen if Haruko had not interfered. This robot doesn't just exist on its own, it's attached to Ninamori. She is part of it. This is how it's usually supposed to work. I believe that when Haruko uses her base like that, it nudges the robot through the portal a little bit. Because of that, when the robot comes out by its normal extent, it goes a little too far and fully detaches from Naota, but it was supposed to stay attached. What's the point of that? Again, I look at Ninamori's robot. When she's part of it, it seems nearly invincible. It's practically impossible to damage. It only becomes vulnerable once it, expels her. Fragility is exactly the problem Kanti had. Haruko broke him in one hit. This is the most effective she's ever been against the robot. Naota was accidentally clipped onto Kanti in this scene. Haruko didn't realize that's what was happening and thought Naota was actually part of Kanti, that Kanti had that invulnerability granted by being in a robot-person complex. She didn't expect her base hit to damage Kanti. She expected him to react similarly to Naota, basically unharmed, but with something nudged through his portal a little. This is how she expected to get a handle on Atomisk, protruding slightly through a portal designed to channel him. Kanti was always intended to tune into Atomisk. He's literally a TV. But he was pushed too far out of Naota and didn't have his invulnerability, so Haruko didn't nudge anything out of him but broke him instead. So I don't think she intends for her nudging to make the robots detach from Naota. That's just an accidental outcome of her approach. So how, again, was Ninamori's robot defeated? With Curry. It couldn't be harmed from the outside, but it could still be hurt by something which it took into itself. To me, this is one of the central messages of the entire show. In Fooly Cooly, letting someone in emotionally is often conflated with eating food. This is beautifully shown right at the start, through the concept of sharing a drink. This is literally both an act of intimacy, while being actual food consumption. So you can form this invincible fighting unit, like Ninamori's robot in this case, but it's still vulnerable to letting someone in. There's no getting around it. That's not to say that letting someone in is a bad thing, any more than eating food is a bad idea. Rather, the point is that there isn't an ultimate form of being where success is guaranteed in every way. This is also depicted in the climax of Fooly Cooly. Naota is directly channeling the power of Atomisk. He's glowing red, he's got this sweet guitar, he's flying around at will, and Haruko can't land a single blow. He's an unstoppable fighting force. But he has to drop all this power to try and let Haruko in. There's no way around it. You can't have both at once. How are Medical Mechanica's robots furthering their interest throughout this story? Past the first episode, I'd say their bots are trying to smash Kanti to bits, and use those bits to power up and channel Atomisk. The pieces of Kanti are quite powerful. When he finds them in episode 2, he's able to briefly go red and activate more of his powers. Mamimi even captures a picture of him doing this. So I guess Amara is trying to destroy Kanti before Medical Mechanica can. I don't know if he has some way to neutralize the pieces afterwards or if he understands this nuance at all. As for the portals inside people's heads, I'd say there are two different kinds of effects. One is when the person themselves is able to use some power from a distant source, like the red Naota. The other is when a physical thing actually comes out of the person's head. I call the former channeling and the latter manifestation. Channels seem much more common. When Haruko hits someone with her base, I'd say she's pushing a channel toward instead becoming manifest. Normally, manifestations happen the way Amara describes. You start with channeling, then you have a bunch of NO. Taken together, he calls this an NO channel. When something emerges, I call that manifestation. What is NO?
NO utilizes the right brain and left brain's distinct thought processes to open up an interdimensional channel capable of pulling things through.
Amara says it uses both sides of the brain. Basically, I'd say it's a stressful situation where a person's reason and emotion are both panicking, trying to understand the situation they're in, and failing. Both sides of the brain are maxed out. True to the name, this can often happen after a person experiences rejection. That's not required, but it sure helps. People have those kinds of situations all the time, broadly speaking. but it's quite rare that people develop teleportation portals inside their heads. I think moments of high and low aren't that rare, but having a channel in the first place is, and you need both together to actually manifest anything. So how and why is Naota channeling? It's all part of Medical Mechanica's plans. They can somehow induce a channel in a person. In Naota, this is usually evidenced by his physical hardiness. After all, Medical Mechanica makes medical stuff, so by channeling their robots, Naota has super healing powers. This is why Kanti would be much more durable if Naota were physically a part of him, as Medical Mechanica intended. Naota is repeatedly run over by Haruko's Vespa and it barely does him any real harm. This is evidence that he has a channel. This isn't just cartoon slapstick stuff. Haruko also runs over Kamon, and later Miyajun. We see both of them in casts afterwards. People can sustain normal harm in this world, but Naota doesn't, and Haruko is using this fact to run people over and look for who's channeling Medical Mechanica. As Amuro is explaining that only certain heads are good for NO channels, the images used are telling. For Naota, it's him being beamed by Haruko's pitch, which could presumably kill a normal person on the spot, but Naota is only superficially hurt. By contrast, we're shown a choice image of Kamon in a cast, the evidence that he doesn't have a channel for her to take advantage of. But Kamon himself says she did try to use his head. Yeah, episode 4 is a weird one. I think this run them over trick is a new one for Haruko. I don't know if she was doing that back in Amuro's time, so her trying to get anything out of Amuro might have been entirely misguided on her part. In the first half of the show, it still hasn't gotten her what she wants either, so by episode 4, she's ready to blast Mabase to pieces and leave, and is just trying a few last-ditch long shots before she does. One of them is trying to get a robot out of Kamon, despite him failing the Vespa test. Kamon is so self-centered that the only robot that comes out of him, the only idea in his head, is simply a copy of himself. Haruko does have multiple uses for this robot though, most of which don't quite work. More on that later. Another of Haruko's long shots is letting Naota take a swing. Pulling guitars out of people's heads just seems like a specialty of hers. She doesn't seem to expect much, leaving as soon as she sets him up. So what does swinging the bat mean? And why is Haruko so interested in it?
Use your guitar again. One more time, Takun.
It's a sex metaphor of some sort? It's about having the courage to try? I think contrasting the actual baseball game with swinging at the orbital bomb gives some clues. Why doesn't he swing when playing baseball? Well, he might strike out. Then everyone will see that he sucks. That will be embarrassing. But what about the orbital bomb? If he somehow screws up swinging at that, then everyone's dead anyway. Not that he thinks anyone's watching in the first place.
It's pretty amazing, really. You controlling Kanti and then attacking the Great Lord of Fear and even saving the city.
You saw all of that? Where were you?
Or to put another way, why not swing at the orbital bomb? What does he have to lose? That shows what's really going on. It's not about what other people think. If he swings at the bomb and somehow screws up, maybe no one will ever know it, and he himself may only live a few seconds longer. But in that time, he will know that he screwed up and that he sucks. In other words, the fact that other people could see him strike out is irrelevant. The real challenge is whether he's brave enough to learn about himself, even if only for a moment. In other words, when Naota swings the bat, he's demonstrating some capacity to accept himself. I'd say self-acceptance is the main thing Atomisk is associated with. This is why Haruko takes such a keen interest in this display. Maybe she can knock Atomisk out of Naota directly instead of trying to get Atomisk out of our robot, which hasn't been working so far. Mamimi, on the other hand, is in no way glad to see this news.
But he's not the type to actually swing the bat, you know.
This is Naota rising in status to something like her peer, and she doesn't deal well with peers. To Mamimi, everything is hierarchy. Every relationship between two people is between a god and a worshipper, a leader and a follower. Naota is about to ruin that dynamic between them. By the way, Naota had the same discomfort earlier when dealing with Ninamori. She reacted to him as an equal, and he was not ready for that, his relationship with Mamimi being his only model that he had to work from. Naota and Mamimi both struggle with these ideas through the end of the show. But meanwhile, his experience swinging the bat brings a whole new idea to Naota's mind. This big idea is arrogance. It's the idea that his way must be best. This is such a huge and powerful robot that Kanti is unable to defeat it. Naota's desire to help Mamimi is a bit hollow in this moment.
Hey, look at me! I'm the one who's gonna save you!
He's more helping her almost out of spite, and out of arrogance, which is the very idea he's trying to defeat here, and he barely helps. The main thing Red Kanti does is act as Haruko's weapon. He eventually takes a moment to catch Mamimi, but then just drops her into this truck. That seemed only scarcely better than letting her hit the ground. That's all he does for her. By the way, Haruko wasn't even going to participate in this fight, but Amuro goaded her into it.
I don't care, you got it?
Your guitar's not up to it, that's it.
Why did she change her plan so easily? It's because she realized she's having minimal effect in these robot fights. She might swoop in for the final hit, but it's really Kanti doing all the fighting, so she might as well sit back until the fight's over. However, Amuro accidentally points out this means she's basically afraid to fail, sitting out as a result. Even Naota managed to get over this fear when he swung the bat at the end of the previous episode. So she flies into combat, although I doubt she expects to accomplish anything in it herself. You could see Naota's arrogance is overpowering and even subsuming his helpfulness. The fact that the hand's core is able to absorb Kanti is a representation of this. After all, his way is best, so whatever he wants to do with Mamimi is what's most helpful to her. Of course she wants to go to this place with him. She wants it. She needs it. But at first, the core does get knocked out of the hand using Adamisk's space. So why does that happen? There's an important detail to this fight. What really angers Naota here is that Mamimi is, well, overflowing.
Don't call my brother! I'm the one who's here!
That just means she misses Tasuku too much in that moment.
What do you mean? What'll happen?
Probably something amazing.
She's babbling his name and seems shut off from the outside world. This may well be the same thing that happened back in the very first episode.
I'm gonna overflow!
What do you mean?
We don't really see what Mamimi is doing, the camera's just focused on Naota. By the end of the fight, Mamimi isn't even conscious. And the thing is, Naota overflows sometimes too. And the effect is pretty much the same. He loses consciousness. He doesn't remember what happens immediately afterwards.
I could hardly even remember what happened that night, after I got swallowed up by Kanti.
It's even like that when he swings the bat.
By the time I realized it, it was over.
And we don't really know what he's doing in episode 3, but I'd say it's reasonable he's freaking out and calling for his brother while falling from the roof. So I'm saying he does it then too. Another little nugget, he takes a random nap in the first episode. We hear the content of his dream, and it's about Tasuku. Contemplating Tasuku just seems correlated with being unconscious at weird times. When he gets into a stressful situation, Naota gets into the habit of calling for Tasuku, which makes him forget his surroundings for a little while. Again, invulnerability comes at the cost of being an island, cut off from the world. But in episode 5 he doesn't do this. He steps into Kanti fully conscious, so this time he's finally fully aware of his role in this fight. He can finally see that he's just being used as a blunt weapon. This is a rather humiliating revelation. It instantly knocks him down a peg or two. This is how his arrogance is overcome. Then, remember, Adamisk is about self-awareness, so this new awareness from Naota leads to manifesting a little something from Adamisk himself, his legendary base. This is what breaks the robot that is Naota's arrogance. So in episode 6, his arrogance is on ice, and Kanti, his helpfulness, is nowhere to be found. So Naota is in a sort of inactive zombie state for most of the episode. When Haruko comes back in episode 6, she's got him eating out of the palm of her hand. But she never asks him to swing the bat, to use his guitar again, which she was so interested in just a little bit earlier. What changed? What did she find out when she ran off with Kanti? I chalk it up to some details from episode 2. At the start of the episode, we learn that Naota's brain is missing. And at the end of the episode, Kanti transforms into a cannon with suspiciously brain-like protrusions. Coincidence? I think not. I think when Kanti inadvertently detached from Naota, he took Naota's brain with him. Obviously Naota retains some link to it, since he keeps being able to function, but basically Kanti has been running around with Naota's brain inside him the whole time. This means there's a powerful connection between Kanti and Naota, and they're both incomplete without each other. When Kanti manifests Naota in the climax, Naota finally takes his brain back as he climbs out. At this point Naota is put back together, and he can fully channel and manifest Adamisk. He probably gained that ability from having his brain marinate in Kanti all that time, who is an Adamisk tuner by design. If Naota were in one piece like that, when he was having his ego-bruising revelations in episode 5, maybe a more spectacular manifestation of Adamisk would have happened. But since his brain and body were in two different places then, only the base manifested. In this scene, Naota is completely exposing his feelings to Haruko, and her chain link thing goes off. Elsewhere in town, Kanti is having a reaction to this, due to having Naota's brains. That's what the link is pointing to. But once Naota is back in one piece, exposing his feelings makes Adamisk fully manifest. I think that, in running off with Kanti, Haruko is able to finally realize there's two halves to this story. She's not going to get what she wants without letting them recombine. She needs to let Medical Mechanica's plans run their course a bit more, putting all these broken pieces back together before they can set up a good channel to Adamisk. Only then can she try to take advantage. That's why she's advancing Medical Mechanica's plans in episode 6, when she had previously been trying to bop all their robots as soon as they appeared.
Taku, it's time to get what I want, but I need your help, Kate.
What does she actually want Naota to do as this plan proceeds? I think she told him something like, they're going to use you to channel Adamisk again. Let them do that, but then don't let them use your power. Once that's happening, instead of using the power for anything, just come out and let me hit you in the head one more time. If he did that, I think it would nudge Adamisk out of his head a little. Then Haruko could, I don't know, start munching on the protrusion from his head. That could be the only way to make Adamisk vulnerable enough that Haruko can have her way with him.
Only one of us can eat him, and that's gonna be me!
Again, eating is a metaphor for letting someone in emotionally, which of course Haruko phrases in the most aggressively unilateral way possible. Amuro puts it much differently, but it's all the same concept.
She's in love with him.
In this final episode, Naota is basically doing the Mamimi thing. Haruko is his god, and he is her worshipper. And by the way, what is this symbol here? Sure, the red and blue symbols look like stylized versions of adult and child written in kanji. But what's childlike about the terminal core absorbing kanji and then merging with the big hand? I think adult and child are only associations, and the real meanings are a bit broader. I think they mean something like leader and follower. Leaders are more associated with passion and adulthood. Followers are more robotic and childlike. This symbol shows up here now because Naota, brains and all, is fully in a follower mode this episode. This is why Medical Mechanica's plan is unfolding so smoothly this time around, because Haruko told Naota to help it along, and he's dutifully obeying. Adamisk, on the other hand, is more like a passionate leader, so this symbol shows up on him, and at times when he's starting to be channeled.
Come over here. Don't let her manipulate you.
Amuro has the wrong idea, as often happens. There's no trickery. Naota and Haruko are being open with each other. There's little need for secrets between a god and her follower. This degree of honesty is quite refreshing. She's told him just what she wants out of him, and he intends to fully comply. He's going to channel the power, but just let her beat it out of him. So why does he change his mind? It's because of Mamimi.
That high school girl looked kind of sad. Seems like a little kindness might help, but you'd need some maturity to treat her that way.
She's inside the hand too, just like Naota. She's clipped to the full-grown terminal core, and she disappears when it goes out of frame, but it seems like she was sucked into the hand when the core merged back into it. So Naota is reunited, both with Kanti, who is his will to help Mamimi, and with Mamimi herself. The smoke covering the town only helped keep her out of sight and out of mind, but now they're all smushed together inside the hand or wherever it sends them. However, I think Mamimi is okay with this sequence of events. She's often in favor of wide-scale destruction. She wouldn't mind ironing out the planet. She would be no worse a channeler than Naota. The point, though, is that in this reunion, Naota wants to help her. This leads Kanti to rematerialize, since Kanti is the manifestation of that desire. This is another good moment to ponder just what the emotional backing for Naota's desires to help really is. Although the big hand was born of his own arrogance, this time around it was Mamimi's destructive urges that fed the core. And while Naota didn't deal with Mamimi too honestly, she'd used him pretty unkindly too. Contrast to Ninamori, who wanted to make sure Naota understood there was something genuine behind her advances, a claim Mamimi can't honestly make. The point is, it's not at all clear who's to blame for the overall situation. It's not clear Naota has anything like an obligation to help Mamimi. But that's the point. If it were that clear cut, it would be a logical response. It would be blue, not red. And that's not what this is. This is Naota having an emotional cause for action. It doesn't necessarily make clear logical sense. I think his guilt for his part in all of this is what motivates him, taking responsibility even when he has plausible ways to avoid it. I think this sort of willingness to take a critical view of himself is the kind of thing that draws Adamisk to Naota. But what does helping Mamimi even mean in this situation? Especially since he's in a servile mood from dealing with Haruko. The best thing to do for Mamimi might not necessarily be what she wants. So Kanti, his will to help, is all fired up and trying his best, but he can't square this circle. He can't figure it out. Neither Naota's general facade of helpfulness, nor the guilt backing his desire to help Mamimi really provide the answer here. So Kanti has a surge of Eno and manifests something. What he manifests is Naota himself. Naota's solution here is to swing the bat and try and do what he thinks is best for the situation. The people involved may tell him off afterwards and say it wasn't the best thing, and he's willing to take the heat, but first he's going to make an honest swing at it. That willingness to consider that he might be wrong and accept the consequences if he is the main distinction between this and the arrogance he was struggling with just one episode back. It is a fine line. So the first thing he does, his main action, is to bust Mamimi out of the hand. Even if she wants to run this big iron and upend everything, Naota thinks the best way to help her right now is to get her out of this situation. Then Haruko attacks him, since he's using the Adamisk power. He only defends himself. He may be thinking that letting Haruko get her mitts on Adamisk isn't the best thing for her either. Or maybe not, but either way, before giving her the chance to get Adamisk, he wants to try and let her in. He gives her a chance, no matter how remote, to accept and reciprocate his feelings for her. And the thing is, she almost takes him up on it.
Wanna come along?
Whether Naota himself sees it or not, this is another message to us, the audience. Sometimes, when you swing the bat, when you honestly express your heartfelt desires, sometimes what you wanted was really just a completely terrible idea. Yes, you're exposing yourself to others' opinions of you, and you could get rejected or made fun of, and those can be tough outcomes to deal with. But there's a whole other universe of problems that could also happen because what you wanted is just bad.
Know what? Forget it. Because you're still a kid, Takun. Save it for next time.
Fortunately, Haruko recognizes what a horrible idea it is to actually have a romantic relationship with this child, and ultimately does him the kindness of turning him down. This story declines to punish Naota so harshly for swinging the bat, but we, the audience, can still get the message that there are various downsides to all these concepts that are generally lionized throughout the show. Being a fully self-aware combat god isn't the answer to every single thing, and neither is honestly swinging the bat, but those are still good things in their own ways. So what has Haruko been up to this whole time? She's got myriad schemes and plots, pulling the strings behind many of the show's events. As I said, she also often serves as an exaggeration and distraction from some relatively mundane character interaction that's already happening in the story. In episode 1, she distracts Naota as he builds up the nerve to tell Mamimi what he knows about Tasuku. She then weakens his resolve by planting the idea that someone else could be as capable as Tasuku, maybe even Naota himself. In episode 2, she orchestrates most of the events. She knows Kanti is looking for his shards, and she's planting them around town to make him appear where she wants. It's no accident that Mamimi notices and begins to worship him, nor that he appears exactly where he needs to be for her ritual at the end of the episode. The wings he wears this episode are put on him seemingly as part of a gag, but Haruko really intends for him to imitate the look of Mamimi's black god. The orchestrated connection between Mamimi and Kanti pays off, and the tension culminates in the form of a robot. Haruko tries to nudge Adamisk out of it, but no dice. It just explodes. By the way, Haruko uses a left-handed base and usually swings at lefty, but after an abortive lefty swing, she fights this robot right-handed. It put up a fight, so she tries to put one back in return. Is Haruko actually left-handed or right-handed? In episode 3, she's probably helping Kamon with his information gathering. She has a surprising amount of familiarity with him and his magazine, so she's likely aware of some of the goings-on with Ninamori and is intentionally encouraging tension between her and Naota. It's no coincidence all three of them ended up at this train station. She even brings Kanti along to the school. This is an attempt to cause friction. Maybe Ninamori would say she recognizes him, which would show that she's been to Naota's place recently. On the other hand, Kanti is like a secret Ninamori got to see about Naota's household, so making him public like this spoils some of that intimacy. Speaking of Kanti, his headpieces show up again, but Haruko doesn't let him put himself back together. She's already encountered him in one piece before, and it didn't do her any good. However, I think she holds onto these pieces for use in episode 4. One of her long-shot attempts is pulling a robot out of Kamon. I think she tries to augment this robot with Kanti's pieces to try to help it channel Adamisk. The resulting robot is quite dysfunctional and can't even stand on its own 2 legs.
Why won't it stand up? It's because of this extra layer thing.
She ultimately removes this failed extra layer, which is somewhere under his clothes where we can't see. She knocks the orbital bomb Shiosaki out of the sky and beams Naota to make him channel his healing power. However, she doesn't nudge it out of him with her base, it only serves as a beacon for the bomb. She lets Naota try and swing at the bomb like she'd always intended to, though she doesn't expect him to succeed. You might well ask why Haruko's schemes are so indirect and convoluted. I'd say it's a smokescreen to hide her intentions from her Space Patrol overseers. They seem to be watching her somehow, and her intentions aren't that well aligned with theirs. She needs to make it look like she's haplessly reacting to the circumstances around her, but she's actually orchestrating most of them. In episode 5, she has Naota and Kamon fight over her by the river, where Mamimi will be able to see them.
You like Haru-san.
How can I like someone who's insane?
How much do you like her?
Naota's feelings for Haruko aren't really relevant. Regardless of them, Mamimi isn't ready to deal with Naota as anything like an equal. But anyway, once Naota develops enough self-awareness to manifest a bit of Adamisk through Kanti, Haruko runs off with Kanti. She hasn't grasped that Naota is in 2 halves, a separate brain and body, and eventually figures this out during her time away. She comes back in episode 6 with the understanding that she needs Medical Mechanica to put the pieces back together a bit. She tells Naota what she needs him to do, but he ultimately makes a different choice. Adamisk manifests fully, but this isn't what she wanted. She needed him just nudged out a bit, vulnerable enough for her to consume. By the way, over the course of her fight with Naota, she attacks him both left and right-handed. Her final swing, her last-ditch effort, however, is right-handed. Who is Haruko, and why is she so interested in Adamisk? I would say she's a bizarre specimen whose mind works in the opposite way of how most human minds do. That's okay, because she's an alien. I would say that unlike humans, Haruko is driven by reason first and foremost, and that reason is what causes her emotions. She's striving for power, and the most powerful being she's met is Adamisk, whose power is largely red, emotionally driven. So her emotional drives are usually just a tool for her, a choice she's making. In other words, she's a righty pretending to be a lefty. Her blue base and her right-handed swings, at times of greatest desperation, show who she really is.
Naota, it's time to lay it on the line. What does Fooly Cooly mean?
Ah, this cursed question. What does the phrase Fooly Cooly mean? It has no single fixed meaning. It's an indistinct euphemism. It's something that a character says when they want to refer to something, but they don't quite want to name or describe the thing they want to talk about. What exactly that thing is differs each time the phrase is used. So the title of Fooly Cooly doesn't have one specific meaning, but instead it refers to the general idea of avoiding confronting things head on. That seems like a thoroughly appropriate concept to name the show after. Those are my thoughts on Fooly Cooly. People avoid confronting things within themselves. You can have great power through confidence and self-acceptance, but you still need to expose yourself to others' opinions, about as much as you need food. There's a lot that can go wrong, but you should honestly express yourself every once in a while. Hopefully you found this to be an interesting take on a great show.